Vijay discovering the success path, what every entrepreneur should know. Vijay had always believed that life was not meant to be lived in small circles. Growing up in modest town, surrounded by the endless repetition of daily routines, he carried inside him a strange restlessness as if his soul refused to settle for ordinary life. His father worked in government office, buried in files and paperwork that never seemed to be end, while his mother managed the household with discipline and silent strength. Vijay respected both, but every time he saw his father weary eyes return home after another tiring day, he told himself he would never let life to reduce him to that. He wanted to dream big, yet the problem was not that no one around him understood what big meant. As a boy, he loved the night sky. He loved the lie on the terrace for hours, staring at the stars, fascinated by the infinite mystery above him. His friends teased him, calling him Space Boy. But Vijay, those stars were not just twinkling lights, they were promises of something greater. He read about rockets, satellites, astronauts, and the marvels of space exploration. But as he grew, so did reality hit him. In college, when he shared his dream of contributing to space, his peers laughed. You, from here? Stop joking, Vijay. Be practical and get an MBA. Work in bank, earn money, and settle down. And for a while, he almost believed them. Vijay completed his studies in Magical Engineering College, hoping it would bring him closer to aerospace. Instead, he found himself working in a small automobile parts company, designing gears that nobody remembered once that machines were assembled. Day after day, he felt himself fading into the monopoly of he had promised to escape. The passion inside him was alive but trapped, waiting for a spark. That spark came one late evening when he was scrolling through articles online, trying to distract himself from the boredom of his job. A headline caught his attention: The growing threat of space junk, humanity's invisible crisis. Curious, he clicked. What he read that night changed his life forever. The article spoke about thousands of pieces of debris orbiting around Earth, dead satellites, rocket parts, broken equipment, all over an unimaginable speed. It explained how even a tiny screw traveling at 2,800 kilometers per hour could destroy a satellite worth millions. It relieved that if humanity didn't solve the problem soon, future space missions could become impossible. Scientists even had a name for this nightmare: the Kessler syndrome, a chain reaction where collision created more than debris, leading to an unstoppable cloud of destruction around Earth. Vijay's heart raced. He had never thought about this before. The world was obsessed with reaching Mars, colonizing the moon, and launching satellite every week. But who was thinking about cleaning up the mess? No one. That night, Vijay couldn't sleep. He started at the ceiling, but his mind, he saw the earth surrounded by metallic ghosts, floating reminders of human carelessness. He thought, if no one is solving this, why not me? The next morning, he shared the idea with his colleagues during lunch. They laughed. Vijay, you can't even fix the coffee machine in the office properly, and you are talking about cleaning space. Forget it, man. This is a billionaire problem, not for people like us. Even his family dismissed it. His father frowned and said, Stop wasting your energy on fantiness. Get a stable job, prepare for promotions, think of marriage. Space junk is not your responsibility. But rejection did not extinguish in the fire of Vijay's chest. It only made it burn brighter. For the first time in his life, he felt he had found a purpose so big, so audacious, that it terrified him. He started researching day and night. He read NASA reports, ESA documents, academic journals. Most were far beyond his understanding. but he refused to stop. Every page made him feel closer to the future he wanted to create. The deeper he went, the more possible it seemed. Technology being discussed included giant nets in orbit, laser systems from Earth, even robotic arms, each required billions of dollars and government scale funding. Vijay was just no one man with no money, no influence, and no experience. But inside him, a voice whispered, "Every revolution begins with one unresolvable dreamer." One evening, while walking back home, he stopped by a scrapyard where piles of broken machines lay scattered. For a moment, he imagined the junk floating above the earth instead of lying on the ground. Suddenly, an idea struck him. What if space junk could be recycled? What if it could turn into something useful instead of left to drift endlessly? It sounded absurd, but absurdity was the birthplace of innovation. Over the next few weeks, he sketched crude diagrams of satellites that could capture debris, melt it, and repurpose the material for building new structure in space. Aluminium, titanium, composites, all could be reused. It would be like creating a recycle plant in orbit. The more he thought about it, the more real it became in his head. But dreams required sacrifice. Vijay quit his stable job despite everyone calling him reckless. With his small saving, he rented a tiny workspace in a corner of an industrial area. The walls were damp, the roof leaked during rain, and the floor was cracked. But to Vijay, it was a laboratory of hope. He bought second-hand equipment, borrowed books, and spent sleepless nights trying to design models. His friends stopped visiting his relatives, whispered about his madness, and his father refused to speak to him for weeks. Loneliness crept in, but so did the determination. Still, failure became his constant companion. His early prototypes looked ridiculous. Metal rods tied with wires, motors that sparked, and small drones that refused to fly. Suppliers mocked him when he explained his purpose. Investors slammed door in his face. Once, when he presented his idea to a group of startup mentors, they laughed openly. One of them said, "Son, even Elon Musk wouldn't touch your idea. Who do you think you are?" That night, sitting alone in his broken workspace, Vijay cried. For hours, he questioned himself. Maybe they were right. Maybe that this dream is too big for me, too insane. He had lost his job, his saving, his reputation. The pressure crushed him like a weight on his chest. But then he remembered that boy lying on the terrace, staring at the stars. He remembered the promise he made to himself, never settle for ordinary. And so he rose again. Vijay realized that if he wanted to be taken seriously, he needed credibility. He applied for online aerospace courses, studied relentlessly, and connected with research of formula. Slowly, he began to understand the science behind orbital mechanism and materials engineering. He started small experiments, building magnetic nets using electromagnet, testing drones to simulate capture, melting scrap material to see how it could reshape. Every little success became a candle in his dark tunnel. Months passed, money ran out, he survived on instant noodles, skipped electricity bills, and once even sold his bike to buy parts. His health declined, but his resolve grew stronger. One day, after countless failure, he managed to create a small robotic arm that successfully captured a piece of metal in his lab. It was nothing compared to a real space junk, but to him it was proof that this dream was not a fantasy, it was a reality. In that moment, he knew he was not just changing the impossible, he was building the future. Yet, the world was still blind to him. He needed a breakthrough, sometime that would bring attention, funding, and partners. And Faith, with its strange sense of timing, had already begun preparing his first real test. Because far away in the skies above, two satellites were about to collide. The news spread like wildfire across every channel, every newspaper, every corner of the internet. Two satellites, one decommissioned and one still functional, had collided in a low Earth orbit. Millions watched the simulation footage that showed shards of metal scattering into space like a deadly storm. Scientists warned that dozens of new fragments, each moving faster than a bullet, had now been added to the growing cloud of orbital debris. The world gasped in shock. For most, it was a piece of sensational news. For Vijay, it was a destiny knocking on his door. He sat in his cramped workspace, staring at the television screen, heart pounding. This is it, he whispered to himself. This is the proof I needed. The world cannot ignore this anymore. Fueled with determination, Vijay polished his presentation, his sketch, modules, and crude prototypes. All were packed into a simple folder. He contacted every aerospace organization he could find: ISRO, NASA, private space companies, universities, etc. His email carried the same subject line: a low cost concept for recycling space debris. Days turned into weeks. Replies came, but they were not about what he hoped. Most were polite rejection, others simply ignored him. One response from a reputed professor stung the most: ambitious but unrealistic. Please focus on more practical problems. Vijay clenched his fist. The sting of rejection hurt, but the silence hurt more. It felt like screaming into an endless void. Still, he refused to quit. He borrowed money from an old college friend, promising a reply his someday. With that, he registered for a small aerospace innovation explore in Bangalore. It was his first real chance to present his idea in front of profession. The night before the expo, he couldn't sleep. He sat staring at an robotic arm prototype, rusty, fragile, and imperfect, but to him it was a symbol of home. He whispered it like a friend: tomorrow, you and I will prove them wrong. The next morning, the expo had buzzed with energy. Stalls glittered with polished models, glossy brooches, and sophisticated 3D printed designs. Startups display satellites the size of suitcase, students showcase drone swarms, and companies advertise rockets capable of launching fleets of nanosatellites. Amid that grand displays, Vijay's stall looked embarrassingly bare. A small table, a second-hand laptop, and a wobbly prototype. People passed by, barely glancing. Some clucked. Is this a toy? One visitor smirked, looking at a robotic arm. No, Vijay replied calmly. It's a concept model. Imagine this in space, capturing debris, melting it, and reusing them as a material to build orbital structures. The man raised an eyebrow. Instruction story. But where's the proof it can even work in zero gravity? You have just built a cloud. The words cut deep, but Vijay kept smiling, kept explaining. Hours went by. Most people ignored him. A few listened politely before walking away. By evening, his voice was very much tiring. His hope was almost drained. And then, just as he packing up, a young woman in a simple blue kurta stopped at his table. She picked up his brochure and read silently for a few minutes. Unlike other, she didn't rush. She looked up and asked softly, "You really believe this can work, don't you?" Vijay nodded. "Yes, I know it's look crude now, but if I get the right support, I can take this further. It's not just about removing junk, it's about building a new industry, a space recycling industry." The woman smiled faintly. I'm Ananya. I work with a research unit that collaborates with ISRO. We are always looking for fresh ideas, even if they sound crazy. For the first time that day, Vijay felt very much hopeful. She asked him to email his concept paper to her team. It wasn't promise, but it was a hope. That night, walking back to shabby rented room, his heart felt lighter. Weeks later, Ananya arranged for him to give a small demonstration at a research center. It was an opportunity he had prayed for. He spent every remaining rupee on improving the prototype, smoother motors, better sensors, stronger grip. He rehearsed for hours. Imagine the applause, the recognition, the breakthrough. The day of demonstration arrived. Scientists and researchers gathered watching with curious about spectacle eyes. Vijay connected wires, switched the robotic arm, and explained his vision with passion. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady. If we can recycle junk in orbit, we reduce risk and open resources for future. What if your next satellite is building using yesterday's debris? Nods of interest appeared around the room. Encouraged, Vijay activated the arm to capture a test object. For a brief moment, it worked. The arm extended, gripped the object. His heart soared. And then a disaster. A spark burst from a motor. Smoke filled the air, and the arm froze midway. The room filled with murmurs. Someone coughed and whispered, "This is an amateur work." Another says, "Nice enthusiasm, but not ready for real science." Vijay's chest tightened. He wanted to shout that this way it was just a beginning. The failure was part of progress. But the pity in their eyes crushed him. Ananya gave him a sympathetic glance, but even she couldn't defend him. That evening, he sat alone by a lake near the campus, staring at still water. His dream felt like they had drowned. He thought of his father's word, his relatives, his mockery, his friends' doubt. Maybe they were right. Maybe he had chased an illusion. His stomach twisted with hunger, but the real pain was more deeper. Tears blurred his vision. For the first time, Vijay thought of giving up, but just then, an elderly man sitting nearby began feeding crumbs of pigeon. The birds fought, pecked, and scattered, but kept coming back for more. The old man chuckled and said aloud, "See, they fail, they fight, but they return. That's life. We return until we succeed." Vijay wept his tears. It felt like universe has whispered him through directly. No, he couldn't give up. Not now, not ever. The next morning, he returned to his workspace with renewed fire. He analyzed the failure, noted every flaw, and began working again. Failure was not his enemy, it was his teacher. Days later, a global announcement shook the world. The United Space Alliance, a coalition of major space agencies, declared an open innovation challenge. The challenge was solutions for the growing threat of orbital debris. The winner would receive funding, mentorship, and the chance to collaborate on actual mission. We just stared at the announcement on his cracked phone screen. His heart was racing. This was it. This was the moment he had begun waiting for. He clenched his fists and whispered, this time, I will not fail." The day the challenge was announced, Vijay felt like the universe had spoken him directly for years. He had carried the idea inside his head like a secret fire. Now the world itself was asking for it. The timing was no accident. He believed this time was his chance, his only chance to prove that his dream was not madness, but excitement alone could not build machines. He needed money, he needed parts, he needed time, and above all, he needed belief. His savings were already gone. His family had stopped supporting him. His friends had drifted away. When he thought about all the resources needed to compete with the world's best universities, labs, and $1 billion companies, fear crept into his heart. Can I really do this? He asked himself one late night, staring at the ceiling of the small rented room. Rain leaked through the hole. His bed was wet on one side. The future looked even darker. But then he remembered the words of the old man feeding pigeons was return until we succeed. Vijay clenched his feet. He whispered, "Yes, I will do it. I will return again and again until the world returns." The first step. The challenge required participants to submit a detailed proposal within 2 months. If shortlisted, they would move to unprototype stage. Vijay began writing. His English was not perfect, but he wrote with passion. He explained the concept of orbital recycling units, small satellites that could capture debris, melt it with focused solar energy, and reshape it into usable materials. He explained how aluminium, titanium, and composite could recycled. He even described future vision, building space station from junk, using debris to use as a fuel, and reducing the cost space per travel. But as he typed, doubt filtered in his mind. Would anyone take this seriously? Or would they laugh again, like before? Money became his biggest enemy. He had no funds to even buy parts for a demonstration model. Some days he skipped meals, his body grew thin, but his eyes carried fire. One afternoon, he sat outside a cafe watching people eat. His stomach glowed. He had only 50 rupees left, enough for one small meal or a set of wires he needed for his design. After a long pause, he walked away from the cafe and bought the wires. Hunger could wait, his dream could not. But his body began to break down. He felt sick with fever, lying alone in the workshop, shivering. For a moment, he thought of calling his father, asking for help, but he stopped. His pride refused. If he went back now, he would never rise again. One evening, as he worked on his laptop, the door of his workshop opened. To shock, it was Ananya. She looked at him, her eyes full of concern. "You look terrible, Vijay. Have you been eating?" He forced a smile. Dreams don't leave space for food. Ananya shook her head. "You are impossible." She placed a packet of food on the table. "Eat first, then work." Vijay wanted to protest, but his anger betrayed him. As he ate, Ananya watched silently. Then she said softly, "I read about the challenge. You should apply. This is your chance." "I will," Vijay said, his mouth full. "But I have no resources. I can't compete with universities and $1 billion labs." "Maybe," Ananya said, "but they don't have your fire, and sometimes fire is always stronger than money." Her words lit up something inside him. From that day, she began helping him in small ways, finding research papers, suggesting improvements, even buying small parts secretly. She couldn't risk her job by supporting him openly, but her presence became his strength. As a deadline neared, Vijay submitted his proposal with shaking hands. Days later, email arrived. "Your idea has been shortlisted. You are invited to present a working prototype in phase 2. The heart exploded with joy. He jumped around his small workshop, shouting, "Yes, yes, yes!" But the joy was short lived. To build a prototype worthy of presentation, he needed equipment far beyond his reach. He tried approaching local investors again, but they laughed. One businessman said, "Space junk. Who will pay for junk? Finding something useful, young man." Another said, "This is too risky. No profit, no returns. Sorry." Vijay walked out of the office with rejection burning in his chest, but inside of breaking him, it hardened him. "If no one believes in me, I built it myself," he told Ananya. For weeks, Vijay lived in his workshop. He scrapped metal, motors, and sensors from junkyards. He hacked old applications for parts. He borrowed tools from a friendly mechanic. Piece by piece, he built his new prototype, a small robotic arm attached by a rotating base with magnetic claws to grab metal. It wasn't perfect, but it was proof of concept. Many nights, he fell asleep on the floor, grease on his hand, blueprints scattered around him. He dreamt of stars, of satellites, of his machine flying high above Earth. Each dream pushed him to wake up stronger. Finally, the day of prototype of presentation arrived. The event was held in grand auditorium filled with scientists, engineers, and officials from around the world. Vijay carried his model in a simple box, his heart pounding. As he set up his device backstage, he noticed something strange. One of his wires had been cut. His heart stopped. Someone had tampered with his model. Panic rose inside him. He had only minutes before his presentation. His hands trembled as he searched for a spare wire, but there was none. Desperation filled him. He looked around, then he saw a janitor pushing a cleaning cart with tape and wires hanging from it. Without hesitation, Vijay ran, begged the man, and borrowed what he could. With shaking hand, he repaired the connection just as his name was called. Vijay walked onto the stage. The hall looked enormous, faces staring at him with cold curiosity. His throat felt dry. He took a deep breath and began. "My name is Vijay. I am here to show you the space junk is not garbage. It is a gold waiting to be used again." He explained his idea in the simplest word he could. He showed how his prototype could capture small pieces of metal. The robotic arm extended, grabbed a piece, and placed it in a small metallic chamber he had created using focused light. The metal softened and reshaped into a tiny tube. The audience murmured. Some leaned forward, interested. Others still looked doubtful. But this time, his machine did not fail. It worked. When the demonstration ended, there was silence. Then slowly, applause began. Not loud, not overwhelming, but real. For the first time, Vijay felt the sound of respect. The judges thanked him. They did not promise victory, but they acknowledged his efforts. Later that evening, as he walked out of his hall, tired but proud, he received a call. "Congratulations, Mr. Vijay," the voice said. "You have been selected as one of the finalists for the Global Space Innovation Challenge." Vijay froze. His eyes filled up with tears. He whispered to himself, "From a scrapyard to the stars. I am not done yet." He looked up at the night sky, the same stars he had stared at as a boy. For the first time, he felt like they were staring back, waiting for him. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Vijay had never been on aeroplane before. Now, as he sat by the window seat, flying to Geneva for the Global Space Innovation Finals, he felt both nervous and proud. Below him, clouds stretched like oceans. Above him, the sky looked endless. "This is it," he whispered. "Everything I have suffered, every night, every I have gone hungry, every failure, it all comes to this." But when he reached the conference hall, his heart sank. The room was filled with giants, teams of MIT, Stanford, Tokyo University, European labs, and private space companies, all with sleek prototypes, glossy banners, and a team of experts. Their machine looked like they have stepped out of the science fiction movies. And there was Vijay, alone, with carrying his recycled robotic arm and presentation built on an old laptop. For a moment, he felt small, too small, doubt screamed inside his head. What am I doing here? I don't belong from here. That night, in the hotel room, he stared at his prototype. His hand shook. He thought of quitting. What if he embarrassed himself on the world stage? What if they laughed, like so many had before? Tears rolled down his face. He whispered, maybe this was never my destiny. And then his phone buzzed. A message from Ananya. Remember, fire is stronger than money. You are the fire, Vijay. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled faintly. He whispered his tears. Yes, I am the fire. I will not stop now. The finals were broadcast live. Hundreds of experts, journalists, and investors filled with the hall. Cameras captured every moment. One by one, participants presented. Giant screens showed polished animations, perfect models, flawless demonstration. The crowd applauded loudly. Finally, it's Vijay's turn. As he walked onto the stage, silence filled the room. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with doubt. He placed his prototype on the table and began. His voice was soft at first but steady. My name is Vijay. I am not from big university. I am not backed by millions. I came from a small town with nothing but a dream. And that dream is to make space safe again. He showed how his robot arm could capture metal. He melted it into a cube. It was simple, almost childish compared to others, but then he spoke from his heart. Every day, we humans create junk on Earth. We recycle, but in space, we leave it floating, dangerous, and forgotten. We dream of reaching Mars, but if we don't clean our sky, we won't reach the moon. My idea is small, but it is seed of something big, space recycling. If we can turn junk into resources, the future will belong not just to the billionaires but to the humanity. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then, to his surprise, some people clapped, a few stood. The judges debated for hours. Vijay sat outside, his heart pounding. He saw other teams celebrating confident of victory. He sat alone, clutching his box, whispering prayers. Finally, the results were announced. The first prize was won to an European team with a laser-based debris removal system. The hall erupted with applause. Vijay felt his chest sink. He had lost. But then, one judge, a senior scientist from NASA, stood up. We have a special mention, she said. One project showed us not the most advanced technology, but the greatest vision. A vision that space junk is not waste but opportunity. We want to support a pilot program to develop the concept further, and that project belongs to Vijay from India. The hall erupted in applause again. This time, the sound was for him. Tears filled his eyes. He stood frozen, unable to move, until someone pushed him gently forward to the stage. As he received the certificate, he whispered, this is not just my victory. This is for every dreamer who told that this was crazy. Back home, the news spread everywhere. Newspaper wrote, the young Indian innovator gets a global recognition for space junk recycling. Stranger messaged him. Students looked up to him, and his father, once who refused to talk, called him with trembling voice. I am proud of you, son. Vijay smiled through tears. Thank you, Papa. But inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Funding and recognition were the first step ahead. Lay years of struggle, research, and building, but this time he was not alone. The world had seen him. The world had believed him. That night, standing on the terrace, once again, Vijay looked at the stars. The same stars that had once mocked him now seemed to shine brighter. He whispered, I am coming to you, not as a dreamer anymore, but as a builder. The wind blew softly, the sky stretched endless, and the Vijay felt in his heart this was the real fight. and it has only just begun.